to interrupt. Thank you, Mary. We're being recorded, so Mary's got that going. And I will call this regular meeting of the Public Site and Building Commission to order at 7 o'clock. And we also have with us the Board of Selectmen. They were asking for an update. And so rather than me going to their meeting, they came to our meeting to get an update from us. And so they do have a quorum, and they noticed this as a special meeting. So now they have to call their meeting to order.
I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen for Wednesday, October 25th at 7 o'clock still. Thank you.
Okay, so if you can join us for the pledge. I know the flag's over there. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we see that Kathy looks a little different tonight. So Mary's filling in for Kathy since Kathy's away, and Mary doesn't know everyone's names. So what we're going to have to do is help her out when we do motions or anything like that. I'm going to just kind of say who I see in the room and who we have on Zoom. I'm not sure if others will join us, but so I'm on Zoom. Mary Churchill's on Zoom. She's doing the minutes for both our meeting and the Board of Selectmen meeting. Craig Raza from Ronan is here. Kevin Feniger from STV. I believe Robert's iPhone is Lieutenant Durkin. Kevin from Downs is here, and then meeting room B is all you guys. So in the room there, I see Dr. Carver and Jen, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And then the Board of Selectmen, and then Public Site members, Gerald Roche, John Menti, Dave Olson, Dave Horvath, and John Perna. Roy had already told us that he wouldn't be attending, so he's not here tonight. So I don't see any members of the public, so I don't think we have public input unless anybody wants to be a member of the public. And we don't have any correspondence that's not, unless something came in recently that anybody knows about, but I've got most of the stuff that had come in before. So we have to do our approval of our meeting minutes. So I will make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes for the special meeting of October 6th, 2023. And I need a second.
Second.
Dave Olson, second. Anybody have any input or questions, etc., on that special meeting and the minutes from that meeting? We're all set, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? I know John Menti, you have to abstain. John Menti has to abstain. Does anybody else have to abstain? I think everyone else was there. I was on by Zoom. Okay, did you get all that? What? Yeah, sorry, Mary?
Lieutenant Durkin was absent from the meeting as well.
That's correct. So he can abstain. Okay, so I'll also make a motion that we approve the regular meeting minutes of October 11, 2023.
I'll second that.
John Menti seconds that. Anybody have anything of those minutes that need to be changed, updated, corrected? We are all good to go. Okay, all in favor? Good to go. Aye. In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're good to go. Anybody need to abstain from those? I think I'm getting some feedback and I'm not sure why. Does it sound okay in there?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so that passes. I'm not sure who has to abstain from that one.
David Horvath.
Okay, that's right. He wasn't there. Thank you, Mary. Okay, so moving on to, we're just going to go quickly through the agenda. The Municipal Center renovation, the GP room lobby is complete. I had an email from Brad Hearing earlier this week and asking about whether we were complete, whether there were any more invoices, which the BMP invoice that we paid a couple meetings ago and was about 8,000 plus or minus was the final invoice. And so we're completed with that. Of the 490,000 that was approved, we spent $419,351.95, which leaves $70,648.05 left. So that will go back into the kind of overall ARPA money. And whoever decides how it's going to get used, that will happen at some future date. Brad also pointed out that there had been $20,000 approved for the locker rooms to get started on updating the plan. And that still nothing has been spent of that. We chose, rather than get started on the plans and then run out of money and have to go back and ask for more, have chosen to see if we can get some kind of a firm price, at least to update the plans, not necessarily for construction and administration, but to update the plans. And we'll get that cost together. If it's more than 20,000, we'll obviously have to go and ask for more money, but we'll get that together first before we move any further. So we'll be working on that. So the two municipal center renovation projects, anybody have any questions on those, observations, etc.? Otherwise, we can continue to move along. So the next item on our agenda is the Bethel High School HVAC upgrade. And so it was actually one of the bigger questions that the Board of Selectmen had some had some information they needed updated for them, so that we can continue, so that the town through the Board of Ed can continue to work on getting the grant application completed and in. We don't want to wait too much longer and wait till the last minute to get that completed. So with that, I know that there was a meeting last Thursday. I believe that John Perna and Dave Horvath and Gerald Roche attended, along with Bob Germanero, Chris Troietti, the principal at Bethel High School, and Craig Raza from Ronan. So can someone give me a quick update on how things worked out at that meeting?
So it went well.
Give all of us, not just me, but give everyone an update on how the meeting went well. Thanks, John.
It went well. We started at the high school. We visited 2 classrooms. We popped above the ceiling. We took some measurements, kind of scanned, the way the roof was laid out. We did one on the top floor that would be the roof deck, and then we went to the floor below. And then after seeing that, it was a pretty quick analogy that we have a very similar application from when we did Johnson and Rockwell. So Bob was nice enough to take us over to Rockwell, and we went and looked at 2 classrooms there. So we measured the ceiling there, and there's actually more room above the ceiling of the high school than there was at Rockwell. And the difference being, at Rockwell, if anybody's been in there, the design, the ceiling, where the air handler is above the ceiling actually drops down a little bit, goes out so they could fit the unit, and then pops back up and goes across. To simplify it, if it was done at the high school, you would just keep the same level ceiling throughout the whole classroom. I think it's safe to say the 3 of us, after looking at it, there are quite a few concerns of going with the VRF. I'll start off with the one concern, and I brought the printout with me. A typical VRF right now, there's a organization called ASHRAE ASHRAE is an independent organization that we use in our industry to forecast out our budgets, to know what equipment will be dropping off because of age, and what we have to, look forward to replacing 5 to 10 years ahead. The ASHRAE life cycle on a VRF system right now is 10 to 15 years. On a chilled water system, it's 20 years. That being said, VRF systems are what we call 100% proprietary. So if you have a board go bad, you have something go bad, you have to get it from the manufacturer. You can't go to, if anybody's familiar with Granger, Johnstone Supply, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. There's just other common supply houses where you could just buy off the shelf. Not to say that the chiller, there aren't some components in it, but it's not 100% proprietary. So if you need a condenser fan motor, you can go down to the supply house and get it. You can go to the electric motor in Danbury, you can go to Granger, you can go to Johnstone Supply.
Buy it through Amazon.
You can buy it through Amazon. So the other thing is that another concern that we have is the VRF system, to simplify it for the people that haven't been here, is there's one unit up on the roof, and then you run copper lines to each classroom, and just say, more like an octopus. And the chiller is very similar. You have the chiller up on the roof, but you run water lines down to all the individual classrooms. The problem with the VRF is those lines have to be soldered. So that's an open torch in an occupied school, which is going to force you to probably do second shift. I know in our district, we're not allowed to spark a torch or a welder during a school is occupied.
Just wanted to
So-
agree a little bit, because we did that during the renovations at Johnson and Rockwell. We just vacated the area.
Okay, so not very common, I'll just tell you that. I've been in the school industry a long time. The advantage to the chill water system, you have two methods you could do. You could do what we call pro press, which are, you cut the piece of pipe, you put a fitting on it, there's an electric tool, you pull the trigger, like on a cordless drill, and it crimps the line. So that's one method. And then I was talking to Dave last night, he brought up an excellent idea. There's also the alternative to PEX. And PEX is commonly used in houses right now, condominiums, office buildings. The advantage to PEX is not rigid, it's flexible. Looks similar to like the beer system at a bar. It's got plastic tubing inside and the outside is insulated. That would really speed things up, and there would be no reason why you couldn't do that during the day while the kids were in sections, so you would stage it. There would have to be an area where you say, we'll give you access to, and I'm making it up, 5 classrooms. You run the lines in those 5 classrooms, and then the kids go back in there, you go to the other one. The other thing with the VRF is the VRF has pumps in them. So it's, picture something similar to that the refrigerant lines go to, and then when the condensate comes, there's a little electric pump in there, and it pumps it out. Judging by the ceiling elevations and the trusses on what we saw at the high school, you could just do a common drain line, run it to the exterior of the building, have one solid header, maybe do 5 classrooms, and then just have it dump outside. That's taken, one thing away to go wrong,
Is that with the VRF?
No, that's with the chill water
So
system,
chill,
sorry.
okay.
Can I ask 2 questions, John? So and maybe Craig can help answer this question. I literally just don't know, I just want to understand. Because we know that we have to replace the roof we bought some time by doing some repairs, but let's just say like in 5 years, we'll have to replace the roof on that section.
Yeah.
Would that impact it?
You would actually be better with the chiller. Because the chiller, what they do is we build dunnage. And we put it up on dunnage and commonly it's I-beams, right? And that would be flashed in. So if you go with the VRF, I might be off a little on the count, you're gonna have 8 units up there that are gonna have to be moved when you put the new roof on and put back into place. So the chiller is more roof friendly, I would
And
say.
then what's the?
No, that's not, John, that's not true. The units won't have to move if you re-roof. They'll be high enough off the roof, you can roof
Okay.
underneath and move around, so.
Okay.
The second question I have, and maybe that I have is, what is the cost differential between the type of system you're suggesting? Because we know we're constrained, we talked about it at the last meeting, we're constrained by the dollar amount that the taxpayers approved.
So I'm gonna tell you, it has to be revisited. To tell you the cost, I have no clue what the cost is, but I can tell you, it can't be that hard to do because you've done a similar system just with, you're switching from Freon to chilled water, and you're getting something has a much better life cycle to it, longevity, versus something that you're putting in that's proprietary. And I'm gonna go back to the Freon. You could do, I understand what you said about an open torch, but I'm gonna tell you, I don't know if you know what happened to New Milford School. They had
Yeah.
2 serious fires there, and it
Why
was
did-
because of
why did-
open
Why
torch.
did we do that?
That doesn't make it right. The guy went down the road at 90 miles an hour, doesn't make it right. But he got away with it, the cop
I
wasn't
mean,
there.
aside from that.
You know, it's just,
But also, I mean, the other factor that would, on the school side, operational, is it, never mind the finances of it. It would be a much bigger job, I would assume. You'd be ripping out hallways, or am I wrong?
no.
Okay,
no,
so you would
same
still go
principle.
through that same area.
But so to your point about Rockwell and Johnson, if I remember correctly though, you took a whole bunch of classrooms offline for a period of time. This would not be that big of a chunk of time, you'd be talking days as opposed to weeks and months.
We did a floor.
Right.
And then, remember, we did like the top
So
floor
you'd be
and the bottom
taking,
floor.
and in a high school, you can't relocate that many kids. So with this system, it would be much quicker.
But I guess I would need to know and understand, like, the scope of the project.
Of course.
How much more expensive would it be? Craig, maybe you have some information, because that would probably limit the amount we could do. But
Could I just finish a couple of high points? Because there's a couple of things I have written down that I think are important. So the last meeting, we talked about escalation. Okay? We are very concerned about the escalation that was carried on the percentage. We have a big district where I work, and I went out to 3 manufacturers, and there was nobody less than 20% from January of '22. So that gives you an idea of what we're working with. And I'll give you an example. '22, I would buy a 5-ton package unit for, we have a lot of portable classrooms. I was paying $6,500 to $7,100, depending on what manufacturer I went to. That same unit is $11,000. So that's to give you an idea on expenses, and, you know, it could be commodities.
Even
So,
if we build that in, I'm curious, Craig, do you have?
I actually,
Can I ask-
I have a question for John, and in comparison, if we're looking at, he talks about going over to Rockwell and looking at things. When we did Rockwell, we were renovating as new. We don't have the capacity to renovate as new at the high school. We're very limited in the space we can disturb at any one given time. And that has to be taken into consideration. I know you were looking at space at Rockwell, which I understand, but at the same time, if we're not ripping everything apart like we did at Rockwell, I think we have to take that into consideration, that we're very limited in what we can do at the high school.
So we looked, the three of us looked at it with keeping that in mind. This is a rubber stamp of the VRF for Winchell Water.
But
It
I just
really
wanna know
is.
the difference in cost, so that we could, like, I could get a sense of this, how much it's gonna limit the scope.
Upfront cost might be a little bit more, but down the road, the maintenance cost
I
will be
understand
substantially less.
that.
Can I jump in?
need to
Sorry.
understand the upfront
So,
cost.
so the main reason we're here too is, as you mentioned, you're talking about revisiting this to the taxpayer. And this is a very difficult time, so the cost is super important from our perspective.
Remind you.
Just to really understand, if we gotta go back to the taxpayer for another $2 million or 1.5, we have so many other competing priorities right now, this whole project could be dead in the water. So we just really wanna,
Quite honestly,
Yeah.
Ed, you're dead in the water already.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough, there's not enough here to support the budget with any kind of confidence of doing this project.
what do you mean, what, elaborate on that? 'Cause-
Well, two things, the cost of equipment.
Yeah.
And how much that is accelerated, that doesn't.
With the
just
new
mean that
project or
you-
the new design or the old?
The existing
There's
design.
only-
Okay, existing.
There's only one design. There's only one
Right,
design.
Right.
And, right, there's only one design, the VRF. The other thing is that a good part of this has to be automation, building automation. You gotta add to the existing system. There is not what I'm used to seeing as a designed set of scope for automation. You couldn't put this out and get a good price. And this is the portion that we pulled from the 800-page report, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah, we have an automation system.
Right,
Yeah.
but you have to, what they gave us, they sent out, was their design, or what they gave, it's basically just a boilerplate, covers everything. There's nothing specific for what we have. So it's basically, okay, here's what we've done for the past 1,000 jobs.
Frank,
we've
could you
done.
address that? Because I don't think that's
Yeah,
fair.
he worked with our.
I'm not gonna address anything till they're done talking because I'm just waiting. I'm just writing down notes and I'll address when we're all done.
It was addressed.
Okay. So if this is the bid without.
No, it was addressed, to your point, it was addressed, absolutely, but there was nothing site specific.
But there's, so
That
there's
that I
no,
saw, I
Craig
could
will
be
address,
wrong.
Craig will.
the
I
information
can address it later.
that we have
Let
right
me,
now.
let me address the controls thing. The control specification for the project that was bid for phase 2, which was the 75 building, was coordinated with the current control manufacturer of the facility. We worked with them, we talked to them, we wrote sequence with them. We got the information necessary to put a specification together so they can do the work. So we only had one control bidder on this project because it was flat spec at the time around that Snyder system. So it was coordinated and discussed and specified around the vendor, so it is in the documents. No more information was acquired because you only had a single manufacturer to bid the job. We worked with them through the design, through the study, even brought them on out in the site and walked the system with them so they can put a fair price together when this bid. Now you got to remember, this job was bid. Okay, we received 2 bids on this project and then it got canceled. The one bid was just 3.1 million and one bid was 4.1. There was a big swing between the two because the way they move things around, but this job was already bid already. And when we had a budget, we were well below the 4.1 to get this job bid in beginning of this year. Wait a minute, this was bid, hold on, get my mouse back here. Last year, right? Yeah, no, January 2023. It was this year. January 2023 is when the bids came in. And they came in more than what we can support, so the project didn't move forward. But we had bids beginning of the year that were within our rough budget. Now, granted, you go another year now and another year back, you got to escalate now your percentage, as John was mentioning. So this will increase based on the 9 or 10% escalation that we're seeing currently in the market. But that's where the shortfall comes in on that particular part.
So.
John, what was the escalation that we're carrying?
What was it?
2%.
There's multiple different places where there was escalation in our latest cost estimate, so The one that was, actually, let me open it so I can get the right number.
It's in the Google Drive.
So we had the original cost estimates from Colburn, and then STV added in multiple layers of escalation on top of that.
John, can you explain the ductwork necessary to install the chiller versus the VRF system? Like, what's the
So
scope
the
of that?
The VRF is, not like the cassette that you see on the wall is most common. It's one that goes in the ceiling grid and hangs down. So there's less ductwork, but because they're doing a DOAS system, like the Rockwell School, you just have an air handler. You don't have all that ductwork, like you have a supply that goes out, but it's on this, it reduces in size because your fresh air is coming from a different set of ducts.
Right.
That DOAS would stay, very similar to what's at Rockwell. It's just the method you're using to cool, which would be a very small unit, chilled water. The VRF is very, very small. They would just run a duct straight across the classroom ceiling, above the ceiling. And then if you've been at Rockwell, the returns, which they did an awesome job, they dropped and put a filter grill in the grid, and the filter, they don't even have to go above the ceiling. The filter grill, they reach right from the drop tiles. It's on a door, and it's got a grill and everything. So it's a very similar to the VRF, but with chilled water.
So just to get back, the contingency fee was 10%. This is STV's latest cost estimate. The escalation was only 2.5, to your point. And then there was a 10% contingent for general conditions. So, but you all have access to 5% for phasing and 5% for phasing. So there was additional monies to put in. I guess at the bottom line, because I agree with Dan, I don't feel that going back to the taxpayers is an option right now in terms of looking at changing the overall cost of the project.
Talk about that, yeah. It's a concern.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, I still want to understand, if we went with the system, like listening to you, I mean, are we going to be able to do 4 classrooms? I mean, like, what is the impact going to be to the actual conditions in the building? And I would have to have a sense of, like, I would want to understand that, and maybe Craig has a broad sense of how much more we're talking about in terms of the scope of the project. How would it affect timing, to your point about like phasing in? And then whether or not, because I know that we would have to add $200,000 to the budget for redesign. We're adding the 86,000 for the owner's rep, for the budget for the owner's rep, which we talked about last time, we're fine with. So that's coming out of that 4.1 million. So how much more are we talking to be able to do any portion of this? I mean, is it going to be like a couple $1 million more?
Yeah.
Craig, I mean, do you have any sense, or is that not even a fair question?
It's a difficult question to answer. I don't really have a cost on it. There definitely will be more money. There's been more general conditions, more interior construction required. And I bring this up, and I mentioned it to John and Dave when we were there. If you're getting state money for this project, you're required to follow ANSI S12.60, which is the school sound standards for classrooms. All right. The standard requires that the maximum dB rating for a classroom is 35. That's what the maximum background noise is. It doesn't include people talking, TV monitoring, it's background noise. I went and just downloaded fan coils today. The reverberation or the radiant noise of fan coils of the size we're talking about is between 60 and 65 dBA. That's before you put it above the ceiling, put ductwork to it. You add in the radiating noise about the same. So what that means, and I talked to the acoustician this morning, because if we have to do this, we got to bring an acoustician in to make sure this is going to meet those criteria. The criteria to meet 35 is pretty aggressive to do that. Over at Rockwell, they put in where the fan coils were, they put in the stick ceiling tiles and dropped the soffit, make it work. And I'm gonna be quite honest with you, it's very marginal. And while we were there, when the system was hunting, now even the standard also says you cannot go above 5 dB for a very short period of time, which makes you a maximum of 40 for a very short period of time while things are settling. While we were there, when the unit ramped up, it got a little noisy. Whether it meant it or not, I don't know. Fan coils in this particular environment will require almost your entire ceiling to be replaced. Since you don't have to raise the ceiling because you have room, you have to now deal with that noise, whether you wrap the units in sheetrock, do lagging. So there's going to be a substantial cost for the 28 units that you have to address, 28 classrooms. That's not figured. The VRF units that we provided, forget what John's saying about everything else. The maximum dB rating of the unit out of the box put in the ceiling is 34. So it meets the condition with no additional requirements to do. So you keep all the existing ceilings. So the general conditions cost is what's going to skyrocket on the project, and the time to do work is going to go up because now you're replacing all your ceilings. You're going to have to look at your light fixtures to make sure we don't have any leakage in there for air breakout noise, all these kind of things to put the fan coils in to meet the meet the DB 35. And as a designer, usually when we do school project, I'm supposed to certify that that's the case, that acoustical performance is met. I can't do that without getting accusation and figuring out what needs to be done in order for that to be achieved. So that's the reason we did not offer fan coils as an option, one of the main reasons when we looked at this job. Because one of the things in my report, we said that the unit ventilators couldn't be replaced because they won't meet the ANSI standard that are in the classrooms now. They're very noisy. So I was very clear in our report that the ANSI standard has to be followed. Hence going to VRF, which we know works in that point of view, plus less disruptive. There are some other nuances on there. 15-year life is typical for those things. You can get longer, but that's a good typical number John mentioned that ASHRAE says. You do have some open flame refrigerant, but the thing about refrigerant piping is you buy long runs when you do this thing, and you're just coiling it out, running it through. You can go up and down a little bit to get it through when you order your line sets. So you're only soldering in certain locations. And if you buy them right, your presets coming into your box could be a threaded joint and not a pretty simple. So there's some options you can deal with to minimize this. The proprietary points of parts, yes, if you get a Dakin system or Mitsubishi, you can only get their parts to fix something if it does go wrong. Will something fail? Maybe. When? I don't know. There is VRF in the school right now. You do have 2 systems that are currently running, that have been up and running, as far as I know, without any problems for at least 5 years or more. So it already exists. It's in classroom space, office space currently. What the cost would be, I don't know. But if we have to do, sorry? Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a point that I made to the building committee. I would have to confirm this because I don't want to be 100% accurate, but I know the scope of the grant is limited to just the HVAC systems. So they made a big point to say it when they presented the grant to us, whereas if you had to replace like the whole ceiling, but only a portion of it would be covered in terms of reimbursement eligibility. It was very targeted to the actual system itself. So I just throw that out there too, as a consideration that some of it might not be completely eligible. But I do remember, Craig, about the sound standards when we were at Rockwell, because I remember them coming out, and Johnson.
And
to actually.
And you fell within those.
Yes.
Those.
But to his point, there was a lot of
Mitigation.
and yes, so that it reduced the cost of it. I remember actually being there when we came out and certified for it.
John, how big is the unit? How big's the fan they're talking about?
That goes above the ceiling?
Yeah.
About 36 by 10.
36 by 10?
Yeah, roughly.
By about 24 or 30 inches long.
So and that was my question too, was if putting a chiller system in requires a lot more destruction, going to require a lot more construction, is that covered by the grant, or are we gonna be on our own for that, which would then make us have to look at doing fewer spaces, fewer classrooms? That's a
The-
question.
Well, I think the
The
overall
chiller
system,
system, the chiller itself doesn't require any more scope of work on the roof. You're gonna put it up
Right,
on the
right.
roof. It's interior where you're gonna spend more money.
Uh-huh.
It's just in the classrooms themselves is where you're gonna spend the money. You can run chill water piping in the corridor the same way you're gonna run the bridge and piping. And then you can get it into the classrooms and run it, through the classrooms. It's just what we need to do for attenuation for the fan coils is gonna be where you're gonna spend a little bit more money in here. Plus, you're adding ductwork that you currently don't have to add to the job now. You're adding diffusers that currently aren't in the job right now. Duct insulation, etc. So those are the costs that have to be added, and that's multiplied times. So if a fan call, I'm not going to throw numbers out because it's not really, doesn't make any sense at this point. But those are additional costs.
So you don't need to buy
I'm sorry?
the chiller, you would just need one unit with the chiller as opposed to, how many units do you need for the VRFs? Is it 3, 4, like?
We currently
Like
have
8
4 systems
units?
broken out. We basically broke it up by zone to keep it consistent. The nice thing with the VRF, now granted, the other thing you're missing, if you make these things just cooling only, it's only running 2 pipe. If we're gonna add heating, we're also running a second set of lines to make it a 4 pipe system. If you want supplemental heating with the VRF, we already have heating included because the heat pump system can provide heating. So there's not just chill water lines running, we have to run heating piping as well. And controls
When we
for
talked about
that.
it, Craig,
I'm sorry?
baseboard heat. We were gonna leave the baseboard heat just like you were gonna have with the VRF. And all we were gonna do is put cooling units only, just like the VRF is cooling unit only, right?
No, the VRF is not
The
cooling.
VRFs and the
VRF can provide supplemental heating as well. It also can provide simultaneous heating and cooling, where I can't do that with the chill water system. So there are some benefits. But yeah, if the fan coils were cooling only, I found we are replacing the unit ventilators with radiation, which will provide the base heat. The VRF can provide supplemental heat if needed, but it's not necessarily. There's not a lot more incentive available for VRF because VRF, the incentives are really only available for VRF if you're going to use it as your primary source of heating, which is not the intent. So we don't get the benefit of that incentive. With a chill water system, we're going to get the minimum, less incentive availability for that in more of a retrofit type approach, which is not as much, but there's still some incentive available.
For the commission, you first.
Dr. Carver, one thing that came up in our conversation at the school, based on the concerns John had and Dave, versus, so we had a conversation with Bob Germanero that I think Craig even admitted that some of these projects have gone really well with this kind of equipment, some of them haven't. So from your perspective, Bob's perspective, has he spoken to any peers in other school districts of the concerns that we've brought forward via the proprietary issues and the lifespans versus the other one?
I don't know if he has, maybe Jen can speak to that. I have.
Okay.
And I don't know if you
Well,
have.
that's what I was gonna say,
Yeah,
Steve
go ahead.
spoke to
I did, I spoke to Kevin Smith and Wilton, I know New Fairfield put in a similar system with their new build of their high school, middle school, I think it's a combination thing, they put in the VRF systems. Now, that's not fair, it's new, it's brand new, they just opened the school. So it's not a fair comparison, but I have spoken to some other districts and they have not said to me if there's any concerns. I think at the end of the day, like our goal, when we started this whole project, before we even knew that there was a grant, right? There was 2 main concerns. Getting air conditioned into some spaces that are just like can be 95 and 100% humidity, right? And getting some ventilation into those spaces. And just for the sake of everyone, I know the commission's heard me say this a few times, but when we first went out to bid, contracted with Kohler Ronan, it was because that was our goal, was because we had some ESSER money. The school district had ESSER money, and we wanted to know what our options were with that money to be able to do that. And Kohler Ronan had done an extensive feasibility study of the building. And so at the end of the day, we were applying for this grant. It kind of happened in this weird parallel way. We were doing that work, and then at the same time, this grant came out. The real question is knowing, because I mean, we have a lot of needs in our schools with our increasing population. We have huge special ed needs right now. I don't think going back out to the taxpayers to try to enhance this is wise at this point.
Can I say something? We never said that we wanted to go out to taxpayers.
Well, I'm
But I
just
will
assuming that
say-
this is going to cost
No,
more.
Well, no, wait, back up. So maybe you do less is better. Maybe you don't do the whole 30 classrooms that you wanted to do, and we do it right and only do 20. And I'm gonna share something else with you. I don't know if you know it, I worked for the Wilton School System.
I do know, you told me.
Okay, so Miller Driscoll, they put in a VRF system. A very prominent company that designed it. They went and put the VRF in. They had to close the school the following summer. And they had to go pipe in hot water to every single classroom because the thing couldn't keep up in this environment. So maybe Dr. Smith didn't mention that to you,
Okay,
but I'm gonna tell you that that's the truth.
but the bottom line is, so if we do that, but I think it's going to greatly, I know you say half the classrooms or 20 classrooms. I can't imagine it's going to be 20 classrooms. So then where are we? You know, go ahead.
So,
Well, it would just be
I-
helpful. Like, I mean, we're all talking about the money and we're all talking about this. I'd like to hear the drawbacks from the system, the benefits to the system. And really, I think we should go through that without interruption. We all understand the financial reality of the situation. No one's pretending that we don't. But, you know, we've run into problems on other projects where we didn't necessarily listen to everyone in the room, you know. And I just, for myself, for my own peace of mind is, you know, I know there's some individuals who have a lot more experience in here with commercial and, you know, Craig and I had a nice discussion as well. And I'm just interested to get everyone's inputs. I mean, you know, I do have a working knowledge of chillers, you know, not overly familiar with the VRF units. We use them in our server rooms at the bank just to cool small areas and branches and stuff like that. One question is, you know, we've talked about humidity in the schools. Does a VRF as opposed to a chiller have any benefits in terms of taking that air out, or is it not possible?
So the application of Wilton, I'd like to share that with you.
Okay.
That's one of the severe problems that we're having is mold growth. So what they did was they put the VRF system in, and what they had to do is go back the next summer and put hot water in for what we call reheat. So we subcool with the VRF, they subcool with the VRF, and then they take it so that the room doesn't get, you know, 60 degrees. They take and run hot water at the same time, which also raises your utility costs.
Did they have
Because
the
now in the
DOFAS or
summer-
whatever in it too?
Wait, I think their design is.
Did they have the DOFAS or whatever,
DOAS.
DOAS or whatever that is to do the
I don't know,
ventilation?
Maybe Craig
Sure.
should address it.
correct.
No, I'm
You're
talking about
getting-
Miller.
You're getting your dehumidification from the DOAS unit. And then the VRF, all it needs to do is deal with the local latent. The VRF is completely modular or modulates between low and high speed to control temperature. It also has the ability to provide that passive dehumidification, but the primary source of dehumidification is from the DOAS unit. So you're delivering air to the room that's already dehumidified. And then the DOAS, whether it be a fan coil or would take care of it the rest of the way. So the DOAS will control that high humidity in the conditioned portions of the building.
So then does the DOES also
Right.
provide the air exchange that, because I think we're also talking about not just cooling the areas, but creating air exchange also?
Correct. It
And-
provides the ventilation air for both heating and cooling.
And is that what we can get sort of more or better with the VRF rather than with the chiller, or do we get
No,
it?
the two are completely independent from each other. What they do, the DOES provides the ventilation, which promotes better IAQ in the building. The
Mhm.
VRF or the chiller are just providing comfort cooling.
The cooling, yep, okay.
Yes. Remember, VRF can provide heating as well.
One question we had is, obviously on these proprietary systems, sometimes it just ends up replacing the whole unit. And these are very compact units, not very easy to work on. What is the cost to replace a unit like this? Because I imagine when something goes bad, we're not running all new lines, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We have to take the unit out and put a new unit in. Am I correct, or am I oversimplifying?
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends what broke at the time. Sure, down the road, 15 to 20 years, replacing the unit. It's just like a chiller or VRF. It's got a compressor in it. You can replace the compressor if a compressor fails. You can replace a reversing valve fails. There's not a lot of repair work you do on a VRF cassette other than control boards, which is majority, maybe a condensate pump. Fan motor can be done. But you know, as John says, you got to call the vendor to get the part.
Right, if the rooftop units have problems, so that's proprietary as well, correct?
Well, it's like any rooftop unit. If you buy a Trane rooftop unit, a lot of times some of the components are going to be proprietary to Trane. A scroll compressor is not a proprietary thing to Trane, but control boards would be. Those kind of things are proprietary to the vendor who sells you the equipment. But there are some devices within, whether it be a DOES unit or the chiller, that you can get aftermarket parts for.
And what's the cost of one of these rooftop units roughly that we have spec'd out? Like
The
we said we
VRF
had 8 of them?
There's eight VRF condensing units on the roof, correct?
And what's the cost of each one of those?
I don't have a cost off the top of my head. I apologize.
The other question I had is, we talked about the bids, and the bids ranged anywhere from 3.1 million to 4 million, and that was January of this year.
And months ago.
So,
And not anybody reputable.
so
Well, I shouldn't say reputable, but not your common companies that do a lot of schoolwork.
No, you're absolutely right.
There were
So-
some companies there that, when I looked it over, I had some concerns. I met with them in February, at the Board of Ed. You know, there's a lot of good companies out there that do schoolwork, but none of them did it.
So
Yeah, the problem, John, is
We had
there's
two
too much work out there at the moment.
So we had two bids, one was 3.1 million, the other one was 4.1 million, and that was 10 months ago.
Correct.
And you're figuring 10% escalation is what was the number you gave
12
me?
and a half
12 and a half. So
was in the STV bids, cost estimates, yes.
realistically, when would this project get going in terms of like where you would have guaranteed prices?
Well, we
I mean,
have-
we're 10 months, I don't know how good those bids were for. Normally they'll give you a time frame that those bids are good for. Did they
The
mention?
bids, we would have to rebid it. We definitely would have to rebid it. But
90
the
days
issue
is
is
most.
now, the issue is right now too, it's another compounding issue. You have to apply in essentially a month and a half. You have to reapply for this. I have no sense of like where we're going. And I don't feel comfortable if we wanna do, to John's point, if we wanna do a smaller area, if that's the way the committee and the town wants to go, then we would have to do a lot of work, and I'm not sure we could meet December deadline. So that may push us out another year in terms of the application for it. So I think there's 2 more rounds of it. The other thing that I said this last week, that I don't think is even realistic, the state's being unrealistic. If we get the grant in March, like theoretically, if we were awarded the grant through March, we would have to have all the work done by December of 2025. I don't think that's realistic, because every school district in the state is applying for these grants. And talk about having no vendors now for you out to bid. I can't imagine how bad it's gonna be at that point too.
So one of the questions I've been sitting on that I really want to understand, because we're looking at back to the cost of the system, and let's assume for a minute, we're gonna get 15 years out of one, or 10 out of one, out of VRF, and we're gonna get 20 out of a chiller unit. Let's assume that. If we're looking at another million, 1.5, 2, whatever the number is for that, I really want to understand what the cost would be for just replacing the modular units of each thing that breaks in 15 years. Because I'm looking, and I'm not the guru here, but I'm looking, and it's like, $2,500 for the whole unit that goes in the ceiling, and probably about 20 grand for one of those rooftop pieces. Assuming, let's say, half of them fail in 15 years, we're certainly not looking at $1 million project. And I think that's the part I'm struggling with when we're talking about how we go back and pay for it, the priorities. I mean, the school certainly has priorities, and if we do have to go back to the taxpayer, that takes a lot out of their chit. Because now when they go back asking for special ed or all the things that we need, that's a real thing. Same thing for us on our side, for the taxpayer. I mean, we got to worry about fire trucks, and we got all these other competing priorities to get 5-7 years more out of a chiller unit if there's not really a big bang for the buck. Like, if we can turn around and replace the majority of those things modularly down the road, I think it's a very real consideration. And that's kind of what I'm here to hear, is not only pros and cons of both units and getting them in, but long-term looking at the bang for the buck. Because we do need them. Remember, we did close school last year a couple of times because it got so bad. I guess when that's what I mean. This year. Yeah, when they redesigned, the windows up there, I mean, it's really awful. And I know where you were coming from in the beginning, just saying, let's get some cooling up there. This thing is now going into a much bigger project. And if it's the right thing to go, I mean, we've talked about this. If it's the right thing to do, we'll do it. I think we really need to sit back and look at the cost of it, long term. And that's part of what I haven't really heard, because I don't know if the numbers are right for, out of here, a new unit is 20 grand for one of those things on the roof, and it's $2,500 for the thing that goes in the ceiling. If I don't have to replace all the other stuff in between, then how do we justify another $1 million?
I mean, what's a chiller cost, Sean? 40,000, 30, 40,000 for a chiller, somewhere around there? 40K? I mean, close,
Yeah,
right?
the problem with the VRF system is they're 100% proprietary. And what's happening is they're evolving so fast that you'll buy one and you'll say, oh, this one, not working anymore. Well, now you gotta change the unit in the classrooms and the unit up on the roof. You know what I mean? So they all.
So now you're a $25,000 fix because of.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up the tonnage right now. We can get a general idea online.
What happens with the Freon too? Like when they change the cooling, what happens with that?
That's another valid, very good point. So we're in transition right now. A lot of the equipment now is 134A, then they went to 410. 410, everybody's tooling up right now is getting eliminated. 134 is getting eliminated. So the nickname for the new 3 refrigerants coming out, they're partially flammable. They contain butane. And all the factories right now, equipment has a very long lead time because all the factories, all the big 3, so Train, Carrier, and York, Daikin too, you can put Daikin in there, they're tooling up now for all what called the butane refrigerants, because they're phasing out 134A and they're phasing out 410. So to your point on refrigerant, the whole refrigerant platform is changing literally as we speak.
I have a question for that.
Because I know we've replaced the middle school chiller a couple of years ago. I'm just waiting to find out.
Yeah, that was at least 50,000.
Oh, I think it was more. I think it was a couple hundred thousand.
It was. To Dan's point about the cost of replacing things in 10 or 15 years, we've had that problem with the existing high school, that we couldn't go back to the state for reimbursement because it was still in the life cycle of the equipment. So by going with a 20-year life cycle versus a 10 or 15-year life cycle, at the end of the 20 years, we would be eligible for reimbursements again?
No.
Not necessarily. It would depend on the scope of the project. Go ahead. It would, yeah, well, I guess technically yes, but I think. it
You'd
would
have to
be-
put a
it would
project
have to be
together.
Part of a bigger
Right,
renovation
right.
project, yes. Or we wouldn't go back just to replace HVAC, because they wouldn't reimburse for maintenance. It would have to be part of a bigger project.
Okay.
I think they would view it as maintenance. Kind of like we're replacing unit 2 right now. And what is that one? Injection 1. They're not reimbursing us for that because it's already been paid for, so they wouldn't do that. It's maintenance at that point. If you were doing a larger renovation 20 years from now,
Yeah.
yes, they would.
Dr. Carver, when you submit your grant, do you have to say which unit you're putting in, or do you just have to say, you know, we've done engineering and we're moving forward with cooling our school?
We have to put a budget in. And the budget has to include how much we're estimating for construction, equipment, design work, owner's reps. We have to put in that kind of information, but to your point, we don't have to put the exact amount, but we have to put the scope of like what we're trying to improve.
Right, you know, you're saying
Right.
however many 30 classrooms. My
Right.
question is if you submitted the grant and during that process, you put this out to bid again to see if you get more bids on it and a more current number. Because I guess my concern is if this number comes over the 4.1, right, and let's just say it does, you know, I mean, it's, you know, costs are all over the board right now. If it comes over the 4.1, we have two choices, right? We're either scaling the project back or going back to the taxpayers.
What we did last time and what I would recommend we do again is we bid the highest priority, which we know what it is, and then we bid alternates, just like we did in the school project. So if we have enough money, we're gonna do this next, and then if we have enough money, we're gonna do this next.
I get it, I understand, but what I'm saying is if the numbers are, you know, off the charts from where we thought, you know, and we're still able to apply for the grant and we're scaling the project back at that point, I understand the concern to get all the classrooms done, I get it. You know? But if the numbers do come in way over where we think they are,
We won't do as many anyways.
right, but my
So-
point is at that point, do you switch to the chiller system? You know, because at that point, you're scaling back anyway, without really knowing what it's gonna cost, we're just throwing darts at a board.
Can I make a suggestion? 'Cause we
Yeah, of
do
course.
this-
I mean,
we do this
we're here to
all-
listen to everybody.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make a suggestion, because we do it all the time. We could leave the VRF in there, in the bid package, and you could have alternates. And the alternate could be, based on the time frame, just an open suggestion, to get a design to go with the chilled water and have it in your bid, and when your bid goes out, you're gonna have numbers for the VRF, and you're gonna have numbers for chilled water, and then you say to yourself, at that time, which one do I wanna select? Because I'm sure you could submit that
I hear
that
you, and
way.
I do recognize that that's an option. The only issue is it's $200,000, like, that's gonna cost to do that design. And it's just gonna affect the overall scope of the project.
Dr. Carver, so if you apply for the grant for X amount of classrooms, it goes out to bid and you need to reduce that scope because of cost.
Yeah.
Does that affect your grant?
No.
Okay.
No. So that would be okay.
Not that,
So
I
and-
mean,
and-
just,
and-
just, because we had,
Go ahead, finish.
we had this conversation, last week when we were at the school that, okay, is there fallbacks if the bids come without having to
Well,
throw
if
it
we
all
got
out
it-
and start again?
If we got a cost estimate, which I'm sure they can do, John, right? I'm looking at you.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sure STV, the problem is, it's coming out of my operating budget. Right now, even getting it re-cost to deal with the owner's rep and the escalation is gonna cost us, schools, about $7,000. If we get a second cost estimate with a chiller system, it will give us a sense of what the scope is. I just don't have the money to put towards that second cost estimate. Because then when we apply for the grant, we would still have to end up doing the design work, and we'd have to include that in the scope of the grant. But at least we would have cost on both. I don't know, is that something, go
I
ahead.
was just saying, I don't think we can submit two different cost estimates, because the grants
Oh, yeah, you're right.
require each project must have a detailed project cost estimate.
But we could put in there a design number, and then the cost estimate based on whatever's left in the VRF that we could afford. And then, I mean, I'm trying to figure out a way that it could work to do it.
But then if you redesign, you said it's 200,000,
Yes.
plus we're already taking 80,000 out for owner's rep. That wasn't originally figured, correct?
Right, that's
So
just,
there's $280,000.
that's not going towards the scope of the project.
Have they given you a cost estimate of what the redesign, because they have all the calculations, they have all the blueprints,
Well,
they've done all their
right.
homework.
Yeah, the
They just gotta
$200,000.
convert from one unit, one system to the other system.
We got it from Park.
Yeah, that's where the $200,000 comes from.
And that number, you gotta remember,
much was
was
it?
just a dart. That was a dart, and because I was asked kind of last minute. We have to go back to the architect, because we gotta do all new ceiling details. I gotta get an acoustician. He wants 30 grand just to show up and do his work. I gotta check with the structural engineers, gotta read them the platform, so I gotta get all the consultants back in. You're right, I have all the loads done, I have all that stuff done. I gotta rewrite the specs, rewrite the sequences, reselect all the equipment, do the ductwork distribution for 28 classrooms. So there's a lot of work that still has to get done on our part. That number was kind of carried. It started out as 150, then it went up to 200. So that's an outside number. It's probably going to be less, but we got to get all the consultants. I haven't asked them. I just got a quote from a architect to do a job over in Madison, similar type thing you guys are trying to do. And he charged me, it was 80 grand to do the ceilings. So it's might not be cheap. I don't know what it's gonna be.
Because
Why
in
would we
order,
do the ceilings over?
Sorry?
Why would we
What
have
was
to redo the ceilings if you went?
If we go with fan coil units, we have to change the ceilings. That's so the fan coils are not gonna be above the dB of 35. So you just can't put back a standard acoustical
Fine.
ceiling. That's the work that has to happen yet.
so it's more than just having your calculations for one system versus the other. There's a lot more work involved for construction.
Oh, it's a complete new reason. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying. There's time and effort. But, Dr. Carver, and I was talking to Brian about this, the real key you just made is you don't really have to describe what you're proposing to do. You have to have a budget you're proposing to do, and you can work within that budget. So that's your only benefit that you have. And you're not going to get a decision until March of what, if you're selected for the grant. The question is whether or not you went out to bid prior to selection, and if you did get selected, then you say, okay, let's hit the ground running. Your work that you do in 2024, you're not going to have any equipment for the summer of 2024. Unfortunately, nothing's going to be here. You'll get submittals, but there is opportunity to do some work, but you're not going to be able to do as much as you'd like. But there is some, potential work that could be done if it's pulled off. If you wait till 2024, you wait till March and you go out to bid after that, you're going to lose 2 months. That means you wouldn't have a contractor on board till June at the earliest. hit the ground running, and then you probably wouldn't get much benefit out of the summer. And then you'd have to have it all done before, you said December of 2025. You basically have 18 months in one summer to finish it. So, but
Correct, the other thing is,
God,
to throw out reality, we have to do the design again, because we don't have the budget for that. So that would have to actually come out of the 4.5 million, which we would only use if we get the grant.
What's the max dollar amount you're allowed to put in for the grant? Is it capped?
Yeah, it's based on the referendum. So so the 4.1 million amount, it's based on that, because we had to submit that a referendum passed and what the amount was of the referendum. So that's what the cap is.
So we'd have to redo it and go for another referendum before we can even submit the higher, or do less.
If the choice
It's
was
gonna end
made
up
to
that
do
you
a
would do
larger
less
project,
scope.
we would
Yeah,
need a
that's,
referendum.
that's awful.
Yeah.
I mean,
The referendum amount sticks, so we would have to scale back the scope. We would not have to have another well,
Right.
if we wanted to make the scope bigger, yes, we would have to have another referendum, but I think sticking with the referendum amount and scaling back the scope would be a better option at that point.
But Dr. Carver, you don't don't know what the grant would be?
Oh, I know exactly what the referendum was.
No, I know the referendum, but
Grant's
how
a
much would we be getting from the state?
It's about 47%.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
they have a specific number.
Yeah. I think it's like 47.1% or something. We can look it up for you. It actually got raised slightly.
Have you looked at the long-term use of the high school, and at what point you feel that you're gonna be due for another renovation over there? Like, is there
I
is
will
there
be
some
well
sort of
retired.
long? Well, that's, I mean, it's just kind of on my mind, like, you know, I mean, we're talking about all this stuff, if, I'm sure you guys have a long-term strategic plan and capital plan, I'm just wondering, is the high school on that plan?
It is not currently on the capital plan, it is the
No, so yes and no.
Well, the
thing
HVAC is, but not a whole building.
Yeah, there's not a building redesign. I mean, I personally don't think, unless the enrollment keeps going up, I personally don't think the high school itself needs to be redesigned. I think the HVAC issues as a result of the last renovation are just horrific. And so we're paying for that over and over again. But I don't see it happening in the next 20 years, 30 years. I personally wouldn't see it happening in that time, unless something went crazy with the enrollment.
You were doing a facility.
Yes,
Study.
I do, I am, we want to go out to bid. We got a bid document through Monroe to look at our facilities and look at the enrollment projections and look at kind of when we might run out of space in our buildings. So we are going to engage in that. I'm not positive that it will directly affect the high school in the near future, but I'm not positive.
That's our cleaner.
Oh, it is?
It carries like a boat box around.
So, I don't know.
Well,
where we are.
I think to that question of where are we with having to possibly renovate or whatever the high school, the biggest thing that you're looking at right now is the HVAC. And so having, going out to bid, creating the whole bid process, RFP, et cetera, to look just at the HVAC system to get that upgrade done, hiring Kohler Ronan, their report basically is very extensive as far as upgrading the HVAC. This grant covers one section of that upgrade. There's still going to be more to do. There's some already in process and will be completed next year, I think it is. But this grant is part, and then there's other parts that are going to have to be dealt with down the road to continue to upgrade the HVAC at the high school.
The major issues at the high school right now are the roofs, which we did do that little fix. So hopefully we'll get 3 years out of that. And then in the HVAC systems. But when you look at the Kohler report, some of them don't have to be replaced for a while. The most immediate problematic stuff we're doing right now. And we have done over the past couple of years.
What was the total number? Was it
It
nine?
was 9-something
Nine,
million, but that was.
just under
that
10
was-
million, that was
that was
a
a
while
year
ago,
ago, yeah.
yeah, that was
That was
a
2
while
years
ago.
ago.
Okay, yes.
That was a while
And,
ago.
and some of it we did, Brian.
I remember.
We've done 2 units, we're doing 2 more, so we're in the process of getting that done, so. I guess to wrap this up. Do you
So-
want us to write the grant?
Yeah, so basically, we have to
And-
look at this. If we want to go forward with the grant, we have time constraints, and so we need to continue to move forward if we do want to do the grant. And again, it's not the Public Site and Building Commission or the town doing the grant, it's the Board of Ed. It's got to come through the Board of Ed to be submitted. And, you know, to continue moving this along, if we, the town, want the Board of Ed to go ahead and put the grant in, can we move forward with the information we have and not spend more money on doing redesigns and everything?
I think the options are, you want us to submit it with the design as is, with the owner's rep and the escalation fees adjusted? Because we know we have to do that, right? Or do you want us to have it submitted with a whole redesign, owner's rep, and all those other pieces?
Right,
And that's the 2 choices.
then let's look at reality. You're not going to redesign until you get the grant, assuming that you get the grant. So
We
that
might
means,
get the grant. That's a possibility too.
well, that too.
But I think we have a much better shot now because they put so much more money.
But the point being is you're not gonna find that out till March. Right. Then if you decide to go with a redesign, that's going to put you to X to out to bid. And then you have getting a bidder, then now you got Y to build it. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of problems.
So are we saying we can do the redesign after we get the grant?
No, we would have to put the design budget in the grant.
But then if we didn't redesign it,
If you did, well, I guess if the town wanted to pay for the redesign separate from the grant, that's one option. Or if we didn't redesign it, could it be applied to the original design that we're gonna implement anyways?
probably wouldn't get reimbursed for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think the most important thing is first, to get your application in, and it gives you time, right? You have time.
But I need to know what to apply for.
But what I'm saying though is if the town, you know, if at the end of the day, you guys continue your discussions and, Dave, I just want you to hear me out.
Sorry.
Okay? If at the end of the day, you guys continue your discussions with Craig and everyone's working together, and you guys come to the conclusion that, you know, hey, we really think it would make sense to do for a redesign, and I don't want to speak out of turn, maybe we as a town say, you know what, it's money well spent, and, you know, we kick in, you know, that would have to be a group decision, obviously. Maybe, you know, the Board of Selectmen says, look, we're listening to all the experts in the room, and, you know, we're interested in doing what's best for the town and our money, and a little more money spent may yield huge dividends in the end.
So, just one quick question, you're replacing units right now?
I don't know that we can do that, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
These are additional ones.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
adding.
once they get the
Yeah.
grant, there's only so many
Yeah,
things that are
Yeah,
reimbursed.
these are additional. so we're-
No, I know,
That's what you won't get
reimbursed.
reimbursed.
Are you
The
replacing
additional
units?
cost
Not
of
have-
the project.
Oh,
For the-
them.
for the town,
That's
because it helps
Okay.
us.
Unit 2.
All right, you guys, you can't have 3 conversations going on at once because the rest of us can't hear anything. So please.
Dr. Carver, may I ask you a question? The 4.1, is that the maximum you can submit the grant based on what the approved referendum was, or can it be higher based on escalation or whatever?
So meeting room B is muted. It's got to get unmuted. All right.
It's the top threshold, Craig.
So
So you
I
only have 4.1 million no matter what.
Correct.
that's correct.
Correct.
How much were these?
Okay, so no, I'm
I
just thinking
just-
out loud. If you only have $4.1 million to spend regardless, that's all your grant can be. correct?
Yes, yes,
And regardless, so no matter what, we can talk all night. If we only have 4.1 million, the grant has to go in with an estimate around that 4.1 million.
yes,
And then the point is, what do we build with that 4.1 million? And if we can't add more design fees to that, it's either, like I said, it's got to come from somewhere. But the thing is, the 4.1 is the cap. So something has to be put on paper that could be built with alternates. That's going to come in just under 4.1, because you probably have some contingencies in there, and being renovation, there will be contingencies, unforeseens, that need to be accounted for. And you get your grant in for December, and you have some time for decisions. But it really comes down to, what do you do with the additional cost to cover? And it's the 4.1. Now you're taking out your commissioning agent, you're taking out your owner's rep, whatever the design fees are all coming out of that money. So that you don't have 4.1 to spend for construction, you have something less. But the key
Right.
is, the grant can't exceed 4.1. So if the grant is written for that value, and if you don't get it, you don't get it. But if you do get it, now you got the 4.1 to do what you need to do. And it's kind of the type of system at this point is really secondary, because I don't think it's going to be solved in tonight's call. It's just, what do we need to do to get the grant in? I think that's where we're going now.
I agree. And so I'm going to make a motion, which we can discuss further if we would like. I'm going to make a motion that we instruct the Board of Ed to move forward with the grant application as per the existing plans and an upgraded budget.
I'll second that.
So who's the second? Was that John Menti? Okay,
Yes.
okay. So do we need more discussion?
Nancy, what was the last thing you said in part of the motion?
They move forward with the plans.
Yeah, but
Move forward.
As currently designed.
Move forward with the application as currently designed with an updated budget.
with an updated budget, I mean, the
Well, we would
budget's
have to update the
4.1.
budget for the owner's rep, because we didn't have that, and we want to address the escalation issue.
So it's the 4.1, it's just how you're gonna
Right.
shuffle the numbers.
That's correct.
Yes, yes.
Now.
We
if
still
go
have to
back-
stay within the 4.1 million. We just have to put the numbers that the state needs to see, line items for all these different things, then it needs to equal 4.1 million.
Liability, the only potential liability would be is if there were design costs that had to be adjusted, that wouldn't be included in that. That would be the only potential liability.
How much was this design?
That design included, didn't just include this project. It included HX1, did I say that right?
Yeah,
Unit
HX1.
2, so the
Tier two.
total of it was like 280, was it 280?
Something like, I actually can't log into our system right now to double check because I can't get through the VPN.
But it was, I want to say, John, it was about 280, but it was not just for this project, it was for all of those pieces.
So the units that the AX, whatever, other two units you're talking about, those were replaced. How old were those units?
One was, HX1 was from 1975. And Unit 2 was done as part of the renovation in 2009. Was it 2009?
Yeah.
It was part of the period, and it just failed.
Yeah.
It just failed. So the design work included, it was a broader scope than just what you see. So that's the only potential liability. So we're all aware of that, correct? That there wouldn't be money for redesign.
Well,
Unless we
but I
come
have
up
a
with-
question, unless the town, is it possible that the town can appropriate that money?
Yeah, of
E-
course, to
either-
Brian's point.
There's two funding mechanisms.
Right, so that's what Brian,
Finance.
yes, that's what Brian brought up
Suggestion.
before as a question or a suggestion. And yes, it could come
Yeah,
from,
promise
it
anything.
cannot come out.
Brian's gonna write the check.
Actually, I was hoping Craig would do some pro bono work for us.
But just to be clear, you would also have to, you couldn't go out to bid until that redesign occurred.
Right.
So you all know that. I'm stating Captain Obvious.
We have to,
Right, okay, so I'm clear. We will apply based on
Wait,
the
we haven't
design
voted,
with the
because we
estimate.
haven't voted
Oh.
yet. I need to know if there's more discussion or more questions. I think we've kind of discussed it. Anything else?
I have one last question. So in your proposal, is there a possibility for the redesign?
No, yes.
I would have to put it in now.
They would have to go in as
Ultimately,
part
you're
of the
taking-
budget submitted to the state, or else we can't do it.
And we can get a tighter redesign is.
Rich, your
but-
problem is the referendum is set the number.
Yeah,
So if
4.1
they
is
put it,
the
if they
one.
put in the redesign, 150 comes out of the project.
Right.
That's why they don't wanna put it for the
Or if the
redesign that
town
way.
could do
The
the,
town would be separate, they still have their 4.1. That would just be on us to
Right,
redesign.
but they
But-
may not get reimbursement if we did not use that money for redesign
right,
via the grant.
right. But it might be beneficial, as Brian mentioned earlier, cost effective for a 20-year equipment versus the 10,
Correct.
15-year.
That would have to be a determination.
But I mean, it
But
should
you're-
last
you're
longer
saying-
than 20 years.
Dr.
I mean,
Carver,
realistically.
you're saying that you have to
Absolutely.
say
I think
what-
30 is a more realistic number on chiller.
Yeah, what you're
Dr.
spending the money on.
Yes, I'm listening.
25.
You have
Oh.
to present to the grant people what type of system that you're putting in.
No,
No, I don't. That's
It says detailed plan and detailed cost estimate, those are their directions.
And if you look at the current cost estimate, it does put, you do have the breakout of the units and stuff. Having worked with them before,
If-
I don't know that that's a huge deal, just.
if the budget that's submitted with the grant application doesn't have design fees in it beyond a certain amount, and we decide to redesign the whole thing, we can't spend more and get reimbursed, my understanding is. Correct?
No, I'm not asking for reimbursement.
Right. that money is
We
coming
already
from-
discussed that possibly the town would look into redesigning. Yeah,
Right, right.
we already looked at that. Possibly
Yep.
maybe the town, depending on the cost, and no promises, no one said anything, we're just talking out loud.
Okay.
I want to take it a step further before we vote on it, and I want to say that if we're gonna vote on it moving forward, it's gotta be continued that it gets approved for a redesign. I don't want to vote on something tonight that we're gonna move forward on a maybe of what we're calling a second option. Because telling you, there's too many holes in the project. There's way too many holes in it. And
And I don't think
honestly,
there
I'm
are,
gonna be very frank with you. I do this for a living. That's how I feel. There's too many holes.
I don't think there are holes. I think Craig's been very
Well,
complete with his information, and all the stuff that you've brought up, John, is good information, and Craig has answered your questions. I don't think there are holes.
You know, I think on this whole thing, at this point, we kicked the can down the road here, and we talked about, we know we have that $4.1 million window. If we get the grant, if we get the grant, then if we want to do a redesign, I'm kind of recapping some things here, possibly the town could kick in some redesign money from whatever source of funding you could take it out of. I'm just saying possible. And then, but at this point, I really think that we need to move to get the grant application process started. Because and once we get it, if we get the grant, then we can do second step, third step, and so on and so forth.
The only thing that I would say to this, and I can only speak for myself, I can't speak for Richie or Dan. Before anything comes back to me, I want numbers, today's numbers, not January 1st numbers. Because if we're already looking on a scaled down project based on numbers, that could influence our decisions to move forward with a redesign and say, hey, this is a scaled down project. Does the chillers and stuff like that give us that opportunity? how you guys will, we have nothing to say. I'm just saying, if you're gonna come back to the Board of Selectmen, you know, just make sure we have numbers, real numbers, not, you know, we had a bid of 3.1, we had a bid of 4.1. That was a year ago, you know, because we all know where costs go in a year. So that's my only comment. So,
It's our intent to get updated numbers.
oh, I know, Dr. Carver.
Yeah.
No, I
We
know
just
you're.
can't do it until we know what we're doing, and time is run out. So I can't leave here without a decision, or else I can't apply.
Our estimated funding, if we get the grant, would be $2 million from the state.
Okay, so we do
To
have a
offset
motion on,
that 4.1.
sorry, John, what was that?
Because I just asked that million, possibly $2 million from the state is used to offset that 4.
Right, so taxpayers,
Right.
2.1.
Right.
Yeah.
And it might be worth remembering that when we did the referendum, if we don't get the grant, we don't do the
That's
project.
correct.
That was a
Yes.
contingent on
Yeah.
what we voted on it,
Yes.
yeah.
We could be arguing about nothing for John at this point. But I do think we do have a much better chance because the state pumped a lot more money into the actual projects. They went from 150 million to like close to 400 million. So I think there's a much better shot now. So do we vote on the motion?
So we have a motion on the floor. And I would like us to vote, and I might need help with hearing what's happening there in the room. So, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, so we have 4-2. Motion carries. So it's, yeah, I know, Mary. So it's me, Gerald Roche, John Menti, and Dave Olson. Yes, and John Fernan and David Horvath, no. So thank you, everyone, for the discussion, bringing up all the information that you did, et cetera. Dr. Carver's being instructed to move along. Dan, do you have to do anything official here, or?
I do, Madam Chairman, thank you. I just want to say something real quick, if I may.
Sure.
I'd like to say something real quickly, if I, Chair.
Yeah.
Listen, I know that this is one of those things, there's a lot of contention over it, it's a big deal. I know everybody feels very passionate about it. At the end of the day, I want to say thank you, because we got to remember why we're doing it. You know, we have a bunch of kids in school who have not the best place to get work done because of the environment. I know we're fighting battles on how to best do that. I always remember that we're on the same team and we're working together towards that. So I just want to make sure I acknowledge that, because it's important. It's important, the work that you do. So thank you, Madam Chair. And with that, I will take a motion for adjournment from the Board of
I'll make a
Selectmen.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
And all in favor, aye.
Aye.
So the Board of Selectmen stands adjourned.
Okay, we still have a couple things on our agenda, which if you want updates on those, you can sit around and listen. You just can't talk because I know your meeting's over.
I'll hang around.
Okay,
You know, okay. All right.
so,
I'm gonna drop off. Thank you. I think I'm all set, right?
yes, thank you, Craig.
Nancy? All right, good night,
Yes,
everybody.
thank you. Thank you, Dr. Carver. Thank you, Jen. Thanks, Dan, Rich, and Brian. We're gonna move along to Rockwell and Johnson Schools, the closeout update. We have nothing on the audit. Right, Dr. Carver?
I did email Office of School Construction, I think I told you this last time. And they forwarded it to DAS because DAS took over the Office of School Construction, so I have not heard back from them, but I'll call them again. I'll call them.
Okay, great, thanks.
No news.
So the only other update that we need is on the level spreader. Evan, do you have anything on that that's different than, I know Sunburst was working on burying those pipes?
Yeah, exactly. As I mentioned last time, this is, Pete's trying to close out a bunch of other projects, but it's on his radar. He'll definitely get it done. And he knows that, we're holding that last 5% retainage until he does get it done. So he's, he's got incentive.
So it's not complete yet? He hasn't gotten the materials up there to do it?
No,
Okay. And he knows he has to do it either delivering materials before or after school or on the weekend, et cetera. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right, if you can find out from him what his plan is, that would be helpful.
yeah, as soon as he gives me a schedule, I'll let you know.
Okay. And I don't think there's anything else on the 2 school projects that we need to bring up. So we can move on to the training range. What do we got going on with that?
So training range, we have multiple balls in the air, as you all know. First one is the mental health department. So I spoke with David Johnson. He and his consulting engineer have had direct contact and conversations with Laura. They believe that they have sent her all of the information that she required as of last Friday. And they're giving her space so she could process it. I spoke to him again just before this meeting started, and he had not reached out to her again. But I told him that it's probably fine for him to do so, either tomorrow or Friday, just to make sure that she's got it in the back of her head that she's either got to ask them for more information or give us our approval.
Yeah, okay. So that's progress.
Yeah. I spoke first with Kathy Sullivan over there in their billing department regarding what we had spoken about last time about getting to an acceptable number for delivery of the MAU. We came up with a number of $169,892, I believe it was. One second. 169,879.50 was the number that we came up with for when the MAU is delivered on site, which would leave 249,000 plus left on their contract. She was then going to talk to David about scheduling the delivery. That was last Friday. And then today, when I spoke with David, he had a completely separate conversation with Kathy and was still talking about us paying the $382,000. And we've got our wires crossed here. It's wrangling cats. But I thought that we had a acceptable number, an acceptable deal. And I just David and Kathy are having different conversations. So I need to get both of them on the phone together tomorrow and figure this out.
So the MAU has not been delivered yet.
No. And there and Kevin can speak to this. I did tell them that Kevin is installing the Unistrut and will be ready for them on November 10th. So I don't know if that is affecting his responsiveness, that he's kind of pushing this out because he thinks he has 2 more weeks to negotiate. But we're like I said, I talked to his billing department. His billing department agreed about my logic that this is for materials delivered on site. This is nothing to do with you have to keep your labor prices separate, and we came up with that $169,000 number. So I feel like that's, his billing department agreed with it, so he should as well.
Yeah. Well, I think getting them on the phone together tomorrow would be the way to go, because then they're just going to be talking behind your back and saying, one says one thing, the other one says the other thing. So get them both on the phone together. make a plan to get that thing delivered.
Yeah, and
Don't go beyond the ones.
he still also hasn't answered the question, regarding, I received a new set of drawings and I reviewed it, and I believe I copied you, Nancy and John, on this email a couple times to him that he's not responding, that all these changes to the installation are being performed by Action Target vendors, and Downs does not need to rebid anything. And they
Right.
still haven't given an answer on that.
Right. So, and then what John just said, in looking at getting the MAU delivered and not going any higher than the 169.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's very, I thought it was a very fair number.
Yep. What'd you say, John?
Yeah, talks about 200,000 and we came to 169, so I thought that was very fair.
Yep. Yep. So, and then the unit struts are being installed as we speak, or?
No, so the update with that is I met this steel contractor on site last Friday to give him, get a lay of the land and take some dimensions. And they're working on some engineered drawings. So I'm expecting those tomorrow or Friday. I'll send those off for just a quick review by the architect. And they've already ordered the material. They're ready to get going. And as Evan mentioned, we're expecting to have the Unistruct complete by the 10th of November. So that's the date that we gave Action Target, so they can get in there and do their thing.
Yep. Good.
So I have a question. And I'm gonna ask Lieutenant Durkin if he could click in or chime in. This thing, without getting resolved, without Action Target for the 167,000, this will hold up your range. We talked about this as a group, and we're trying real hard to get the range finished, but we cannot extend funds without a reasonable amount of comfort of the same amount of work being done, if that makes sense to you. The number that they wanted exceeded 300,000, and that was just to deliver the makeup air unit. That all still has to get piped, it has to get ductwork, the inside of the range has to get finished, and I'm speaking for the entire board. If anybody disagrees with me, tell me. Committee, sorry. They gotta move. They're holding the deck of cards, so to speak. The last thing we want to go do is approve an absorbent amount of money, and God forbid they say we're tied up on 5 different jobs. We don't even have enough money to finish it. And quite honestly, it's a proprietary system, so you can only have them finish it. So I'm hoping that everybody understands that this issue with the payment, we're asking, we'll give you 167 and they want 335. The 335 is not an option, Lieutenant Durkin. Not for us, because then we don't have anything that gives them an incentive to come back and finish. So I don't know if, I know there was people that, we looked at 2 different systems. If maybe somebody could pick up the phone and call them, whoever you were dealing with,
Yeah, I don't.
Action Target, but very close to a stall right now.
Well,
Kevin, I don't know, you want to say it, but I think we're very close to a stall. If we don't get this resolved on the payment issue, to have that makeup air unit set on the pad for the 167. That's
yeah, we're not gonna, right, we're not asking the police department to be doing our job and Evan's job and Kevin's job. So I understand what John's saying, Lieutenant Durkin, is basically that's where we are right now. That they've been asking us to pay them more money, pay more than the equipment that they've actually delivered. We would like them to deliver the equipment, then we'll pay in the money. So Evan has said that he had an agreement with their accounting department. And David Johnson, who's the project manager, has said the accounting department told him something different. So Evan's gonna get on the phone with them tomorrow. That's what we need to do. I think that we can't be asking members of the police department to be interjecting here and there, doing the things that they need to do their jobs. But what John said is a good explanation of where we are and that you guys need to understand. I don't know if you have any questions on it, but
I don't have any questions. I have a comment. I think we're about due for having action target in one of these meetings. We've been going between the owner's rep and them for quite some months now. And, you know, respectfully, I think maybe we ask them, could they zoom into the next meeting so we can hash all this out together, just to make sure nothing's being lost in translation here. I don't know where else we could go other than explain to them what our reservation is with paying it all up front now and see what their response is to that. And sometimes when you go, you know, through a third person, maybe that, you know, it doesn't get communicated or the, you know, doesn't sound as dire as or as serious as what we mean. So I would make a motion that we do that. We invite them to come to the next meeting, maybe have a special meeting sooner and have them on the meeting. This David Johnson guy, maybe have him at Zoom so we can talk directly with him.
And and I did mention that was another part of what we had talked about previously, was that whenever he schedules that MAU delivery, that we would have a special meeting to approve that check number, but we wouldn't approve it before it showed up on site.
Right.
it's been difficult to get Action Target to any meetings. Evan has been putting together coordination meetings with Downs, Chikunski Humes if needed, any of the other consultants, and Action Target will often say they're going to be there and then they don't show. Even though Dave or Evan sets it up to be during their, because they're Utah and they're that, 2 hours different, and he sets it up to make sure that they're able to be there, in a timely fashion, and they still don't show up. I think we start with Evan getting their accounting department and David Johnson on the phone tomorrow, and then also strongly suggesting that David Johnson be at our next meeting.
When is our next meeting?
Our next meeting would be November something, 8th.
The 8th, I believe. Yeah, the 8th.
Yeah.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Madam Chair, it's Dan.
Yep.
Yeah, just a reminder, you said I couldn't talk. I am an ex officio member of the board or commission.
That's true.
So,
yes, you are.
I'm putting our comptroller involved in any way to, help alleviate any questions about our ability to pay. We could certainly get him involved in that call if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, I think they understand it's not about our ability to pay. It's their contract didn't include terms of payment. Now they're telling us that they always get 90% upfront and then 10% when they're done. It's a little, I've never heard of anybody.
I wish I did.
Well, Madam Chair, not to mention the fact that they were willing to deliver it for free a month ago.
Yeah.
And now they're holding back. I understand them. That's not lost on me.
Right. And Evan, just like what Dan said, they showed up with it on a trailer, no crane, to deliver it, not more than a month ago, and we hadn't paid them anything. So why can they do that and not bring it to us now?
For future reference, we need to be more specific in our contract on terms of payment.
Well, true.
Who provides it?
Well, they provided, Action Target provided the contract, Marty reviewed it, okayed it, it got signed. So, yeah.
Well, I don't think
do a standard schedule.
I don't think
They
that it
shouldn't
could
be.
hurt to try to get them to come to the next meeting. If they don't,
What's
they
that?
don't. Why don't we at least try to get them on the next meeting?
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
And if we have to put that, we gotta change the agenda around, Nancy, to put that first in the agenda, we can. So they don't have to sit there
Right. Okay.
45 minutes, or we just.
Yep, we can. And it being, if it's a regular meeting, we can always move the agenda around. So are there any other things that we need to know from Downs or from you, Evan, with construction? Anything else we're waiting on?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Yeah.
I believe you have an unresolved motion second on the floor.
I
Lieutenant Durkin made a motion.
didn't hear a second. I didn't hear a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, so what's your motion, Lieutenant Durkin?
The motion was to reach out to Action Target, request that they be at the next meeting via Zoom. David Johnson specifically.
And then we had a second from John Perna. Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Any more discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and anybody opposed?
No.
Okay, who said, oh, you said no opposed, or somebody said no, that they voted no?
No opposed.
Okay,
Oh,
got
good,
it, thank
Nancy.
you. All right, great,
Uh-huh.
thank you. Okay. All right, anything else other than invoices? Do we have any other items that we have to contend with? Downs have anything else that we need to know about?
No, just another, an update on like where we are as far as our scope. So the sprinkler system is substantially complete, and the electrical roughing is at a point where we're ready to be tying in the systems to the existing PD. So I'm going to be coordinating that with the police department, Lieutenant Durkin. So that'll be happening over the next like week or two. And beyond that, I mean, there's, we're moving.
I did have one question with that. If you, I got your email about having to turn off our systems when you guys do the electrical and the sprinkler system. So we'd be on generator for that. Assuming that.
I think they need to turn off the main, but I'm waiting on their shutdown procedure. They have like a whole directions on how they do it. So I'm waiting on that to see exactly what's involved. But from what they
Okay.
told me, it's a quick ordeal for them. It's just a matter of turning off, like I think it's like the main panel, so that they can tie in this new panel, and then turning the main power back on.
Yep.
But the fire alarm, or the sprinkler system is a little bit more involved, because you have a pressurized line, so they need to isolate the area, and yeah. So I mean, we can discuss all that.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions for Downs or for Evan? So I know I have 2 STV invoices. Did those go out to everybody? Are we ready to deal with them, or?
I need to talk to Angela about that, because I didn't understand what she was trying to have you do, and I don't like just crossing numbers out on invoices.
Which is kind of what I did, but so, but I do understand. So the let me see, I think it might be the July invoice. Let me look. Just for everyone, we've got a couple of STV invoices that are awaiting our attention. The invoice for July 2023 was approved by us and paid by the town, but STV's accounting department somehow missed adding it in as having been paid. So when they sent the August invoice, it included July. So it was like way more than a usual amount. And Angela Cahill, who's Kevin's supervisor, said, just cross the numbers out. And I emailed her back and said, really? And didn't hear back from her, which was earlier today. So I think it'll be good if Evan checks in with her if we get a new invoice for that August period. And then the September 2023 invoice, I think, is correct. And we'll just have to deal with those all at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. And those are the only invoices that we have. We don't have anything from Downs, and we're not paying Action Target till we get to an agreement.
Yeah. We do have, for next meeting, Downs has sent in their payment rec and PCO number 2. Those were both approved by Chikunsky Humes as of yesterday afternoon, but again, we missed our window for this meeting.
Okay, so with PCO2, you're gonna need to give us info so we can discuss it at the next meeting and see how that, then we gotta know how it impacts the budget.
Yeah, and so I updated the budget, including PCO2. And we currently are at $28,932 left in our contingency.
28, you said?
Yeah, 28,932.
Okay. That's good to know. Okay, so if you get that stuff sent out in an appropriate time frame, then we'll be able to deal with it at the next meeting, and then also the STV invoices, which will probably be all in one now.
I'm gonna get those resent from accounting.
Okay.
Because like I said, I don't like just handwriting things in.
Yes, I was doing all kinds of cross-offs, and it kind of looks weird, and finance would probably not like it.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to have it reissued. Okay, anything else?
I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Wow.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Good night. Mary, let me know if you need any further info or anything.
Yeah, just the last motion and the second I need. Who made them to adjourn?
Oh, John Menti, who seconded that? John Menti made the motion to adjourn. Perna.
Perna.
Okay,
John Perna.
thank you.
All right, and then